Yeah, thank you so much. Pleasure. So, namaskara, vanakkam, namaskar. It's a real pleasure to see you here. It's been a long while and we've been waiting for you. So, the team here has been looking for you folks to come, and I'm glad that most of you made it. There are a few that are about to come, so I guess welcome to the PhD scholars. This is going to be a very interesting time we're going to spend with you, of course, the master students from all the four programs. And then, of course, there are a set of folks who actually don't need a welcome here, the UFP fellows. I think there are a few of them here. They've been part of this journey for many, many years now, for the last 9 years. And a set of our guests at the moment who are sitting in the front row, who've been part of establishing this institution for a very long time. So I thought I'd start in the beginning with thanks to a range of people who've helped bring us here. I think the most important people, and we often forget them or they're silent in some senses, are the people who actually built this place, farmed this place, etc. As you walk around the campus, you will find their names in various places, because I think the most important thing that we do here is to enable change in practice. Uh, we have an administration team which has actually made this happen, and they will feed you today and do lots of fantastic things. We have an ICT team which is providing all the digital stuff. I don't think many of you are on the phones at the moment, but those who are, they provide the IT infrastructure. You can hear me because of what they do. We have the AOCD team here, which has been very critical along with the communications and design team for you to find us and for us to find you. They're the people who've enabled you, and you've got, I guess, especially the master's students, you must have got hundreds of phone calls from them over the last many months. And then there's a resource development team who's, I think, very critical for many of you who actually have fellowships, because they're the folks who actually raise the resources, and they've got to raise even more to make sure that more people are able to access this institution. And then, of course, we have our people and legal team who've been working very hard. Yesterday, they're making you run around in circles, showing you all kinds of paperwork and kind of stuff like that. They're the team that really makes sure the institution actually functions and works. And then, like you heard just now, our finance team that produces and manages the resources to make this happen. The reason I start with them is that every institution, every process is actually managed and handled by a range of folks who make the system work. And very often, some of us who are either teaching or doing other kinds of things are seen in front. But without them, things would actually not work. In your case, they're also your guardians in the form of the offices. There's a master's program in its office. There's a PhD program in its office. Each of the schools that you have offices. There's my office, of course. The colleagues who actually run the offices are absolutely critical to what you're doing, because they're the people who make things actually move and work. So the interesting thing about IHS, and you learn it very quickly, is, in other places people grow crops and cook in various kind of cuisines, Malabar, Punjabi, Chettinad, Konkani, etc., etc. Here, we grow alphabets. Fine. So there's an SOG, there's an SSI, there's a whole range of different things that are there. So you learn how to navigate that process. बहुत सारी अलग-अलग चीजें हैं यहाँ पे. These are acronyms because even in a small institution like us, there are many different parts. So anyway, I think we are very grateful that over the last 16 years or so, we've had the opportunity of working with a wonderful set of people who've actually helped build this institution. It's been an interesting and difficult task in some senses. It's been a long journey. जैसे कहते हैं ना कि वनवास जो है कहीं कहीं जगह जो है 11 साल की होती है, अगली जगह 12 की होती है, एंड ऑफ कोर्स इन द एक्सट्रीम केस 13 साल की होती है. हमारा 16 साल की वनवास जो है is coming to an end today. Of course, we've been very grateful and lucky to have the company of 350 UFP fellows who've been along with us in that process. But I think the special thing about today and having you here today is that we have now become, over this year, even though we've been planning for this for a very long time, India's first interdisciplinary deemed university. So this country is a big country. We have one of the largest higher education systems in the world. It doesn't work very well, both on and off record. But what I can say is, of the 1,400 universities, well, something between 12 and 1,400 universities in the country, there's a mix of different categories. Many of you would have come from those universities. There are about 50 central universities like the University of Delhi, Hyderabad, etc. Some of you have come from them. Some of you would have come from the institutions of national importance, the IITs, the IIMs, National Institute of Design, and places like that. But many of us would have been educated in our undergraduate program in the state universities, who are, in a sense, the bulk. There are 500 of them in the country. They are the bulk of where education actually happens in the country. Excepting, of course, over the last 15, 20 years, there are about 450 state-private universities. The reason I'm giving you these numbers is that of this whole set of 1,200, 1,300, etc., depending on how you count agriculture or not, there are just 150, actually the 142, we're the 142nd, deemed universities. And it seems to people sometimes that deemed is something that's actually not happened, right? That's not true at all. The first two deemed universities in the country were the Indian Institute of Science and the Indian Agriculture Research Institute, which was set up in 1958. These are a very special category of institutions, at least in their initial imagination. Maybe 2/3 of these institutions are doing other things, but the critical ones have actually been very important in building and managing India's present and hopefully its future. So, for example, the IARI was a center for the development of the Green Revolution. That's where it was built over the 1950s and 60s, and that's why India is food secure in some sense. The Indian Institute of Science, in a sense, is the basis which has created the IT, BT, and a lot of the technical revolutions that you see that have come out of this region, especially in Bangalore. So in some senses, the deemed universities were created, largely public at some point of time. The peacocks and the peahens are welcoming you here. These universities were created to basically enable India to grow and develop and do dramatic things. The Green Revolution, the White Revolution, the Blue Revolution. In fact, the IT and the BT Revolution have been, in a sense, pushed forward by these institutions. So we are a new category, in some senses, maybe 50 years after the initial ones were established, which are focused on questions, and there are two or three like us, one on health, one on basic sciences, etc., that are focused on questions of critical national importance. And as far as we're concerned, and this sounds, for people who come from multidisciplinary universities, may sound a little bit different and odd. We are an institution that's focused on one of the most important challenges or opportunities that India is going to face in this century, and that is the process of urbanization. But it's not only the process of urbanization, but many of the other structural challenges that we are facing, from inequality to dealing with questions of climate and biodiversity. So we are the institution which is meant to be building an ecosystem across the country, helping build other institutions, train a whole range of people, faculty, and build other things to enable the socio-cultural, the economic, the ecological, and political transitions that are going to be part of your lives. I mean, both of your, the personal lives, but certainly your professional lives over the next, 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, depending on how you choose to work and are able to work in what you're doing just now. So the interesting thing about IIHS over the last 16 years is, unlike other places, we were designed to help deliver a mission in some ways, right? Because urbanization is a process, but as far as we're concerned, it's also a mission. It's a means to an end in many ways. And the interesting thing, unlike other institutions which are there to, to find truth, to, enable knowledge, to teach people, to enable them to find jobs, depending on which way you want to go, our focus was actually to make and transform the lives of as many people as we can. In some senses today, we think we haven't really done very much, but my colleagues have done remarkable things in the last 15 years. We've actually touched the lives of about 20 million Indians at the moment. That's 4% of India's urban population. We say that we really get somewhere when we touch about 10%. So we've got a long way to go as far as that's concerned. But this is an institution that's been focused on making and enabling actual change on the ground in people's lives. It doesn't mean that we've transformed things, but we've actually touched their lives. And we've done this across the country. So while we were waiting for you to come here, we have become a national institution. We work across pretty much every state in the country. We work in about 1,500 urban centers, towns, et cetera, et cetera. And interesting, and people are a little confused about it sometimes, we've worked in about 10,000 villages. So we're an institution that doesn't only work on urban questions, we work across the spectrum. We work on villages, on towns, on cities, and of course we work on mega cities like the city that you're sitting at the current point of time. And we've done this through a whole range of processes. I mean, we work on many questions. We work on 30 different themes or so, and we work, through a lot of projects. So when you come in here, you'll hear people working on, lots of different projects that are there. But apart from the actual work that we've done on the ground, and most of us that you see here are scholar practitioners or practitioner scholars, depending on which day of the week we're talking about. We've also actually done something which was very difficult. And when we started this journey, actually was very weak in this country. One of the questions that we were dealing with when we started in 2008 and 2009 is what to teach with. Fine. And the challenge we had at that point of time is people were teaching with either things that came from other parts of the world, or they were teaching with things that actually were happening in the 60s and the 70s. So what we've done in the last many years just now, through our own work, through our partnerships, through our work with a whole range of institutions and people across this country and outside the country, is actually built an entire body of knowledge across maybe 30 different areas, which is what, as you go into the teaching learning environment, my colleagues are going to confront you with. It's not only the ideas and theories and wonderful things that we bring, we're pretty smart people in some senses like you are, but it's also the practices that are very critical in making that happen. And that's been recognized across the world. We are now, I would say, one of the most powerful interdisciplinary research institutions in the world. I mean, very soon, by the end of this year, whatever, the 1,500 odd papers and books and stuff like that we've written would have been cited 100,000 times, which is a very, very remarkable thing for such a, such a new institution in some senses. We have some of the, and you'll see them all over the place, like Deepika was saying, don't applaud them, etc. But we have some of the most cited scholars in the world, some of the top 25 or 10 or 5 in the world are actually sitting in the room. They'll be working with you. And we have systematically over the last many years, over 10 years or so, actually worked with institutions to build their capacities. And this is an interesting question. Why would a research institution, why would a university actually work with people in the field, practitioners, municipal engineers, commissioners, people who are actually in practice? And the answer is very simple. It is to enable you to succeed. See, this country is going through many difficult and interesting challenges. But one of the big challenges that we have is that very few people in the institutions that we work in are actually enthused and empowered to make change. But they're there. In pretty much every institution you take, whether it's the IIHS at one side or civil society organizations or firms and stuff like that, you find people who are eager and capable to make and want to make a change, to do things to improve the functioning of the institutions, to provide public service, to make money, a whole range of things that are important to different kinds of institutions and people. The challenge is they don't have good people to work with. And this is a universal story that you can hear pretty much everywhere we go, and we travel a lot across the country in some senses. So we work, we're probably one of the largest capacity development institutions in the country, and you'll meet my colleagues who work on this. In fact, we're running a capacity development program for officials of the government of Bhutan at the moment, so some people are not here. So we've trained about 17,000 people across the country. We've also, and this is quite important, because the closest thing in some senses are officers from the civil services, the Indian Administrative Services. We've been the leading capacity development agency for the IIS now for the last 7 years or so. Many of us have taught and trained for many, many years. We've trained about a third of the IIS officers in the country. And the question is why? Because we need people who can solve complex problems. As you came here, many of you would have found all kinds of things. The road is dug up today, tomorrow they fix it and it's dug up. So the challenge today that our cities and other places are faced with is that we don't know how to bring things together. We are very good at doing specialist things. We've got wonderful doctors and hospitals. We've got great knowledge institutions. We've got great IT and BT institutions. But if you spend time traveling in Bangalore, you realize the systems themselves don't really work. And the reason the systems don't work is because there are very few people who understand to bring things together, to connect the dots, to make sure things actually function, look forward in the future, to imagine the kind of challenges they have and make that happen. And this institution, and hopefully you folks, because that's what interdisciplinary problem solving is all about, are the people who we hope are going to actually make that difference and that change. Because the real challenge for us is not to do the specialist thing. We've got wonderful people doing that. They're pretty good. It's making sure that everything actually works together and things happen on time. And in a sense, things that you know that are not going to happen very well, you kind of fix them as far as that's concerned. So that's the broad vision that's said as far as the institution is concerned. And the wonderful thing about what we have here is that we have people in this amphitheater who've actually done this stuff. So just to step back for a second, there is this idea that India is going to become a developed country in the next 20, 30 years. Now, we will see how the evidence plays itself out, fine. But we don't know whether we will really become developed or not, because what development is a big question, and we'll come back to you in the conversations we have, either in the research colloquia with the PhD students or with the master students and that thing. But what is known is very clear. We are the largest population in the world, fine. We have about 500 million people in urban areas. We don't really know because the census hasn't been here for a while. And we know that that's going to potentially double. We will become about 800 million people by 2047, 2050, fine. This is the single largest urbanization in the history of the world, fine. China's one has been the single largest one till now. It's almost tailing off just now. They've brought 300 million people into urban areas, and they've changed their lives. There are good and bad things with that. But basically, China has become the single largest economy in the world, depending on how you count it. It has moved pretty much all its people out of poverty. It's transformed their lives. I've worked on China now for 25 years. So I've actually seen it with my own eyes in some senses. I'm not saying that we have to emulate them, because many of the things they do have a lot of problems with them. They suffer a lot in China. Their political system is very different from ours. But basically what I'm saying is, and this is what many of my colleagues have been working on, they're leading on thinking and doing in this place, we are in the middle of that happening at the moment. We don't necessarily know it and see it, because we come from different places and you can't see this all together. But what IIHS does is it will give you an understanding of how that sort of transformatory process is actually working itself out. And it's not only the transformation that's important, fine. The issue is, how do you manage all the complex processes that make up this transformation, the social processes, the economic processes, the ecological processes that come from this and make it happen. And I guess our contention, and we've kind of led on this both in the thinking and the doing, is what we call sustainable urbanization will really help build the foundations of India's future development. And in a sense, we started this journey by asking two very simple questions. And it's written up and you can see it, it's in the library, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The first question was, what should India be like in 2030 or 2040 or 2047 or 2099, depending on what your favorite year is, fine. What should India be like? What should we be looking like? And the second question, and that's where we worked very hard, was what does a young person, and all of us are very young here, fine? We're young at heart at least. What does a young person need to know to help transform this country to make that vision possible? Just two simple questions. Where should we be going? What's our imagination of that? And it obviously has to be a collective imagination in some senses. And then the question after that is, what does a young person need to know? And there were two answers to that. One is a 70-year-old answer, and we've got something here which somebody can just pick this up and take this for me. But we're not really people of the book. But this is one book that I think is quite interesting and useful. You know what that is? What's that? Sorry? Yes, exactly. This is pretty much original. We are one of the lucky institutions in the country that actually has a copy of the original copy of the Constitution, not the handwritten one, because there were only 1,000 of them. But this is the facsimile here. So we're not an institution that goes by the book as you learn, because we don't have textbooks. You have lots of readings because knowledge changes and it transforms itself. But this, and we opened it at the preamble, every day in the library they change the page, is a very important starting point. It was a vision of where India would be. And I can tell you one thing, we haven't reached there at all. Fine. The question, of course, for us, as we hand over a lot of these processes to you folks, is how can we make at least part of that vision real? And beyond that, how can we take that in a very different, difficult, and also interesting world of the 21st century? And I think that was the thing that sort of, helped give us some impetus to what we're doing. And when we looked at this question, basically what we said is, there are many things happening simultaneously. I won't take very much time, but I'll give you a sense of what those are. Because when you see how they're woven together, you'll understand maybe why you're here, and maybe why we're having this conversation. The first thing that's pretty obvious is that we're going through a dramatic, and there are 10 of them, so I'll take 4 or 5 minutes to go through them, is a demographic transition, right? We're the largest population in the world. Nobody in the history of the world has helped manage a country of 1.4 plus billion people. We don't know how to do this. There's no precedence for making this happen in a democratic environment. We have to learn how to make that happen, fine. We're also a very young country, and I mean, that's obvious for the people in the room. Even IIHS is a young institution. Our average age is 37. Yeah, when we started, our average age was almost 30. We were getting a little bit older and wiser, but whatever it is. So that's the first big transition that's taking place, and it's going to be spatially very disparate. As you know, Southern India, Western India has already gone through the demographic transition. Part of the big political battles that are going to be fought in the next few years are going to be around delimitation, how things are going to work themselves out. It's important in some senses. There are many, many challenges in northern India, and there are other challenges in the south and the west that need to be dealt with. So how does one hold together such a large population of people while this transition is happening is going to be a very important question. The second thing that we often forget, and that's really, really important to all of us, health and wellness is central, is we're going through a health transition in which we hope life expectancy will increase from 70s to the 80s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of us are going to live pretty long, so we're going to see really interesting things, but we're also going to see really nasty things like climate change and biodiversity crisis, et cetera, et cetera. But in this transition, there are two things happening. We have infectious diseases at one end, which are still there. We thought we had got rid of them, but they were there. Remember COVID and other such things. And we also have lifestyle diseases. In fact, my colleagues here have done some of the most seminal work in the country, looking at how even in informal settlements, we have people who are dealing with all kinds of criteria of, diabetes, of cardiovascular disease, et cetera, which are meant to only happen to people who are rich. So we're having both these things at the same time. And we have a health system which, as we all know, if all of us have gone through this crisis, I don't know who got vaccinated first in the room here in COVID, we've got a long way to go about this. So you have a demographic transition with a health transition happening at the same time. The third transition, which is what we're all about, is really the education one. And I think the good thing that happened to India maybe 50 years late is that we started to universalize school education. Many of you are the outcome of that happening in the 90s. But we are also going to create both a challenge and an opportunity for ourselves. So we have the largest population of school leavers in the world, fine. And also, potentially in the next few years or so, after we overtake China in that space, the largest population of university-educated workers. But when you have a large population and you don't have work, you have a little bit of a problem there, fine? So the so-called demographic dividend that we have may actually become a very serious challenge. So there's an educational transition going, and in a sense, we are one of the extreme outliers in that process, saying, how do you think of this systemically? How do you deal with it? But apart from these social and human development concerns that are there are underlying processes that are changing our lives considerably. The most important one in some senses is the energy transition, and this is what the climate change business is all about. How do you move from upla and gobar and a whole range of things like firewood, which are still used in our villages. We still have a lot of people who depend on biomass supplies, into modern fuels in a country where 300 million people don't have access to bijli. Huh? How do you do that in a country in which your fossil fuels are primarily coal and everything else comes from the outside, and that becomes 70% of your import bill? It's a really hard question that's there. Because we have to make sure that everybody has equal access to energy, because energy access is an absolutely critical thing for jobs, for livelihoods, for people to be able to study at night. If many of you, have worked in villages in which bijli is not there, et cetera, et cetera. This is a tough one, and we work considerably on that. The fifth one is the information and knowledge transition. And this is an interesting one because India, in some senses, is meant to be at the forefront of this process. But the practical reality, of course, is that this is only accessible to a very small population in the country, except for cell phones. And we are seeing the transition that's happening because cell phones are available, and let's say cell phone access is available for a large number of people. So there are many parts of the country in which you can get cell phone access, but it takes you a day and a half to be able to get to your nearest PHC. So the information revolution is really important. India is meant to be the leader in this space. We have many colleagues who work on this. But the fact is that many of these processes are not designed for, in spite of all the digitalization we've done, to be able to work equitably in society. And again, we taught during COVID, right? We were one of the few institutions that was teaching face-to-face in COVID. And the reason that we did that was in the first term, we found it impossible to deal with things online. If you're living in a house जिसमें एक कमरे में 4 लोग रहते हैं ना, it's impossible to be able to study and learn. So we said, you come in, everybody was vaccinated and in a bubble, and we managed it. So the information and technology revolution is useful and interesting, but it also creates asymmetries. And that sits in two other transitions that are pretty difficult to deal with. One, of course, is the ecological transition, uh, which is happening across the country. And as you walk through this campus, you will see our attempts to try and deal with these questions, whether it's dealing with the brown part of the ecological transition, wastewater, or the gray, which is air pollution. Thankfully, today is not a bad day in Bangalore, and you're not coming in a city like Delhi, or the green transition. So bringing together what we call blue, green, and gray infrastructures is very critical to make that happen. But all of this gives us three things. One is livelihoods. The central part of what we're interested in is actually to enable livelihoods and work for a whole range of people. And when I mean whole, I mean we're talking about 100, 200, 300 million people. As we shift from a rural agrarian economy to one in which manufacturing or the secondary sector and the tertiary sector, which of course leads our economy, are actually holding that process. And it's a very hard process. We know many people here who work on it. I think there are going to be some PhDs working on this. And the challenge here, of course, is we are focused on creating knowledge workers in this city. But the fact is that 85% of the working population in this country are working in the informal sector. And we have a large number of people who are trapped in rural areas, who are older, who don't have an education, and a lot of rural crisis is sort of building. I would say there's an agrarian crisis happening across the country. So if all of these things we're talking about, the demographics, the education, the healthcare, the energy, information, trying to make sure that our ecological systems are fine, that we have, proper ecological health don't work. Eventually, it is about people and poverty, because we still have the largest population of poor people in the country. And in our lifetimes, if we're not able to address that question, then I would say much of what we call development is probably not very useful. So how does that happen? It happens in three ways. The first one is what we call the economic transition. This whole thing. China has done this. You go from a primary sector economy to the manufacturing, powerhouse of the world, and now China is, of course, trying to build out, and there's this big tussle with the China and the United States happening just now on the knowledge economy. How do you build that out? We have a slightly different path because we are a services-led economy, and that's a historical historical reality which is related not just to technology, it's related to caste and a whole range of other questions that are there. So what kind of a future are we going to build where everybody can participate, from the smallest villages to the largest megacities? And in both places, life is sometimes not so easy and good. And I guess the answer to that question is in two places. The first thing, of course, is what we call the social and political transition. And this is a hard one. We work on it a lot. We work on questions of governance a lot here. In such a large country, which has 6.5 lakh villages, maybe 10, 15,000 urban centers that are there, that is towns, cities and mega cities that are there, most of the power and resources is concentrated in a few places. 100 places in this country produce 40% of our GDP. Most of the cities in the country produce 60% of our GDP. So how does one balance that out, both in terms of people's access and time and space, is a core question for us. So the question of how you decentralize power, resources, capacities, etc., so that we're able to really use the power of Indian democracy in some senses, is one of the core questions we try and understand. This is a vexed question, and I think a lot of what you will be doing in practice will be dealing with that. So when I look at all of these things that we talked about, and I'll just sort of run through them again: the demographic transition, the health one, the education one, the energy one, the IT and knowledge transition, the ecological transition that should be happening but is sometimes going backwards, the livelihood transition that is really struggling at the current point of time, and we saw the challenge of that in COVID, when millions of people had to walk back to their homes, and the economic transition, which we thought is going to address these core challenges, but is not very good at addressing questions of inequality and the core questions of social transformation on gender, on caste, on ethnicity, which we still struggle with for now 2,000 years or so. And of course, the governance question. We see the urban transition as a process that brings all of these together. And when I'm talking about the urban transition, it's not about building large cities like we're sitting in the moment. It is about the transition across that entire system that's there, fine. And like I said, this is the largest transition. We have an opportunity to shape it, to make it change, to make it more equitable, to make it more sustainable, to make it more productive, because if it's not productive, it doesn't work in some senses. And I think that is what the opportunity that we have to do in IHS. And I guess the question is very simple after that. Okay, we've got this great idea. It works in some places. We've tried to implement it. It influences, in Rajasthan, we did something which influenced 1 million people. In other places, we did something else, etc. We fed, whatever, I don't know, 5 million people in Delhi during the crisis, during COVID, etc. The question is, who's going to do this? And I guess the answer is very simple. We have to create a cadre of folks, and our fellows are here, they know this, they've been working in this, a new generation of interdisciplinary practitioners who can bring all of these questions together. The challenge today is not that we don't have people. We have got lots of people. In fact, we've got so many people that we don't have enough jobs for them. But we don't have people who can actually weave this together, who can actually create the music that makes this thing happen. And we're hoping that if we're able to enable you folks to go out and be successful and build great careers and build great institutions and do dramatic new things that are there, we will be able to create the institutions that will make the change and make this actually happen. So we built IHS to, in a sense, fill the knowledge gap to make this happen. And we've done that in a way that is a little bit different from other places. So if you look at where we were talking about, Deepika earlier talked about, if you look at our schools, they're not recognizable in most universities in the country. We have a school of governance. Yeah, we don't have a school of law, we have a school of governance. We have a school of economic development, because we don't have an economics department, fine. We have a school of urban systems and infrastructure because we don't do civil engineering and we don't do planning. We bring all of these questions together. We have a school of environment and sustainability. I've got a nice breeze there, it's blowing your umbrellas away. Good. You might want to shut them at the current point of time. So the point is we have to bring together knowledges from these different places in a way that's a little bit different. We are not like a single discipline focused institution. We don't do town planning or urban design or architecture or management or technology. We draw from all of those to try and deal with the questions and the challenges that people feel, deal with in their everyday life, just like you deal with. People don't care if they've got a problem of solid waste or sanitation or electricity or conflict, whether you're trained as an ecologist or a historian or an economist or a finance person. They want the problem solved. We work in teams to try and deal with that kind of stuff as far as it's concerned. So, that's what we do, and we do that in two ways. We have programs that cross-cut and enables to happen. We have a program that focuses on practice and applied research. We have another program that focuses on research. I spoke briefly about it. We have another one that focuses on capacity development. I talked about it. But all of them intersect with these different schools. And you're going to find an interesting way to navigate these processes, because the master's program, some of them are focused on one school, but most of them are across all schools. So when we teach and learn, it's across the entire space so that we're able to challenge ourselves with solving real problems in real time with real people and in real context. So that's a broad sort of story about what IHS is. And again, I've talked too much, but I think maybe I should share a few very simple and honest things about the way that at least some of us experience this thing. The first question, or first lesson I would say, or the first sutra is, what's my name? These guys know it, so they're sick of it. Some of you know my name, but you heard it briefly. What's my name? Okay, cool. So what will you call me? Okay. So most people call me Aru because it's easier. But the simple thing is, यहाँ पे अंग्रेजों वाली बात तो चलती नहीं है. Sir, madam तो होता नहीं. आचार्य नहीं होता. We call each other, or we speak to each other in first names, because I think it's an important thing that's there. And the reason is quite simple and uncomplicated. And this is honest, and people don't say these kind of things when they're sorting out an orientation. The fact is, we can't teach you anything. Okay? And I say that again, we really can't teach you anything. Some of you may be paying a lot of fees to come here. And some of you are getting wonderful scholarships to come here. But the fact is, we can't teach you anything. The only thing that we can do is to help you learn. And that's why we're here. Okay? So the idea of ki sir, madam, aapko ye padhayenge, and then whatever it is, and then you'll do an examination, etc., doesn't work here because it doesn't work in life. It's kind of very simple idea, but it's a true idea in some senses. So the best that we can do is to help you learn. And I guess the greatest gift that we'll be able to give you, if we're able to give you that gift over the next 2 years or 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is this year, is to help you learn how to learn. Because if you learn how to learn, then you don't need anything else. You don't need us. You know, you don't need a PhD, you don't need a master's degree. I'm not saying this officially to the UGC. Even AI may not be able to touch you, because that's the most important thing. Because once you learn how to learn, then you know you can figure out what you need to do, however it is, and what context. And we're giving you a very wide canvas to learn how to learn. There's also the inverse side of that, and that is the best that you can do for us. And that's why I said, you know, you can come and meet me wherever it is, usually after 7 o'clock in the evening, and we're happy to have a conversation. The best that you can do for us is to continue to push us to learn by challenging us. Fine? Because if we learn along with you, we'll improve and hopefully we'll make you better. And most of us are at least engaged in this lifelong learning experience of trying to do things and at least make sense of our lives. So that's the first thing that's it's very important to understand. A little bit different from other places कि बड़े लोग आके कुछ बोलेंगे और कुछ सीखेंगे आप उसके बाद वो करेंगे. It's a different idea, and sometimes it takes a little some difficulty to get to. The second thing is, I guess, लोग कहते हैं कि सब हम सब की एक जगह है. So we've all got a place in which we stay, and we should stay in that place. And this is not the place to be if that's what you believe. Because for us, ना तो कोई चीज़ या जगह ऊंचा है नीचा है. At the moment I'm standing here, I go down there, I'll be somewhere else. But the person is the same. So I think the core thing as far as we're concerned is that you have to find a place for yourself in the world. And we will do all that we can to help you find that, but you have to find it. And I'll give you a very simple example. यहाँ पे कितने लोग हैं? I mean, how many people here don't know how to swim? Okay, cool. So this is one thing at the end of your program, and this is a mandatory course in some senses, is, yeah? So let me do a thought experiment. So that about 15, 20 of you don't know how to swim, fine? So suppose I was like you, and this is what we do in everyday life. We say, okay, let's go in, a little bit over there, there's a lake. We have to get from here to there. So of course you can go all the way around and come back, and it's a long walk, but if you have to race from here to there, how do you do? You have to learn how to swim. So what would typically happen is if some of the folks who know how to swim will get across there and the rest of us will drown, fine? That's how learning is in some senses. We're here to help you to learn how to swim, fine? And how to survive and how to take on the world in rather different ways. Because like I said earlier, we can't really teach you anything, but we can help you learn how to go from here to there. And that's, I think, something that's kind of special and different about my colleagues that are here. And the idea is very simple. It's like I said, if you can learn, we can help you to learn how to learn. The most important thing to understand in that is you cannot learn if you're fearful. Fine? Most of what we've been educated to do is कि आप ये नहीं करेंगे तो आपका नहीं होगा. That doesn't work. You can't learn when there's fear in the classroom. You can't learn when you're enslaved in your mind. कि ठीक अंग्रेज लोग जो कहते हैं अच्छा है, या वो कहता है कि अच्छा, that person is very good, etc. You have to free yourself from that process as far as that's concerned. And you can't really learn unless, and this you'll find not now, it's going to be a struggle. Towards the end of the course, we'll talk about this again. You can't really learn unless you develop the confidence, and I'll say this slowly, unless you develop the confidence and the knowledge to actually challenge us. Fine? So the story about swimming is first facing yourself and saying, okay, I won't drown, I'll still get there, etc. But the thing is, what's happening when you reach on the other side of that body of water? You will challenge us. And in challenging us, you will find truly what you're about. Because in some words, I mean, in the Bultan, there's a word called samata, fine? So equality is the foundation of true learning. If there's a difference between you and me, we can't really learn. We can't do stuff together because learning happens together, fine? So this institution, in some senses, is an invitation for each of you to become our equals so that we can have a real conversation on addressing real questions. And these questions are difficult. They're questions of caste, of gender, etc. at one end, of economic development, of how the environment is not working, etc., 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 etc. And they involve real people in the real world. And of course, we use theory to understand it. We use practice. So that's the other thing that's there. Fear is not the way forward. Fine. We have to do this together. And eventually, our success is that you will challenge us. So that's the second thing. And then finally, in some senses, very simply, nothing will change unless you change yourself. That's what education is about. It's an inner journey. External journey is obvious. You'll do X, Y, Z courses. You'll get hopefully not too many F grades, you'll get A's and B's and all that kind of stuff that's there. That's the outward force as far as that's concerned. If you're able to change yourself, that's a great achievement. But I think what we've learned over the last many years, and I think what this institution is built on, is that the change of the individual is very critical and important. Each of you have to go through that journey, and we'll absolutely try and enable that. And you'll be going through that journey through your entire life. But that change will never hold in the real world unless we all change together. And that's why we have a cohort. That's why our PhD program is not a program in this department or that school. It's a PhD program across IIHS. Fine? Because when we're reflecting on something, we have to reflect across that. And the master's program is designed to be able to enable you to work together in groups of 2 and 3, and you're going to hate us for it sometimes, because you will be working with people who are with very different perspectives, who come from very different backgrounds, etc. But if we are unable to understand how we can work together and change that, our own personal changes are not going to make a big difference in the world. And the world will push back on every direction, on class, on caste, on gender, on language, etc., etc., etc. So if you've got to make that change, the collective change is most important. And that's why when we say we're trying to educate a generation of system integrators, that's an interesting idea. The real thing is to try and build a collective of people. No, now it's 300, 400 of us, 500,000 of us. But 5,000, 10,000 people here who can actually make this thing happen. In that sense, I will just close with two separate ideas. The first idea is IIHS is a special place because it does all kinds of weird things, etc. But it's a special place for special people. And what's so special about it? It's an institution that is built by ordinary people. Aap aur hum. It's an institution that is built by ordinary people for ordinary people. Fine? Yeah? That's a simple thing. We don't say that. Many of us have come from institutions where you go in and said, I'm the best, we are the best institution in the world, whatever it is, etc., etc. We're not saying that at all. We are an institution that has been built by ordinary people for ordinary people, but ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And that is the experiment. How can ordinary people actually do extraordinary things? And that, I think, is part of our journey. We've actually done this in some cases. You can talk to people who've done this. So in some senses, I would say we do that by connecting the dots, by breaking the binaries and boundaries that our world is full of at the current point. We know aise hota nahi na, but we still think like that. We talk like that. Our social media is full of that. Everything we read in newspapers is full of that. That's the first idea. The second idea, which is it's difficult to hold on to in some senses, is we have tried to build IIHS to be a safe space. That's what education is about. You can't have fear. You go back to Rabindranath Tagore and whatever. You can't have fear. I can't have learning and fear at the same time. So you have to have a place in which there is no fear. There's no fear of failure. Most important. We really encourage you to fail, because only through failure will you actually be able to learn and be able to challenge yourself and challenge stuff on the outside. The second thing is, if it's not a safe space, you cannot address difficult, wicked problems, because if somebody could solve the problem earlier, they would have solved it. We try and solve really difficult things which other people don't need to solve, not because we're humne tir kuch mara hai, etc., etc. And the final thing that's there is we embrace diversity, because it is a diverse perspectives and knowledges. It is the youngest person in the room very often, the person who's supposedly the least educated, actually who has the true understanding. And that is the core difference between information, knowledge, and many of us we have a lot of information, some of us have knowledge. The difference between information, knowledge, and wisdom. You don't have to be greatly educated to have to be wise as far as it's concerned. So what drives us in that? And the answer is there. Our core values are very simple. And they're in the Constitution. It starts with the first one, Nyaya. Okay, justice in some sense. A very old idea, but very difficult to implement. And we have to implement it collectively. The second one is freedom. Freedom from want, freedom from fear, freedom from a whole range of things which are difficult places to be in. So maintaining the safeness of the space is very critical, whether it's the classroom or the institution, the ability to be able to stand up and say, I don't think this is right, I think it can be done differently, or I have a different point of view, and let's see how we can work together. The idea of equality, and in the Constitution they call it Samanta, I think Samanta is a better idea for that. And finally, the power of fraternity. Because change does not happen through individuals, it happens through institutions and processes. So in the Hindi version, it's somewhere here. It's called bandhuta in some senses. So those four things are actually fundamental to what we're talking about. Nyaya, Swatantrata, Samta, Samanta, and Bandhuta. That's the thing that underlies what we have. And I think the exploration of those processes is not easy. Yeah? And I've given you a long philosophical talk in some senses. But in some ways, as you walk around this campus, you will say those ideas are great, but you have to make it work in reality. So here you will see in the campus, we function in 4 different layers. Okay? There's a biophysical layer that's there, everything that's around us, we didn't have it. And you guys are going to learn this. This is hard stuff, right? You're going to grow stuff here. Those of you who've never grown anything in your life are going to find all the plants that you're growing are going to die. And then you're going to cook, and then you're going to eat and do all kinds of funny things as far as that's concerned. You're going to learn how to build. Because, you know, if you are not a maker in an urban context, you might be a historian, you might be a archaeologist, whatever it is. You're not able to do much. So there's a biophysical layer that underlines everything. On top of that is a built environment, and you'll see it. We transform the built environment, and we think it's a city. But actually, जो है शहर के नीचे और बहुत कुछ चीजें होती हैं. And finally, there is the social and the political process and the economic process that sit on top of that. And of course, the digital and the knowledge environment. So you'll see the operationalization of all of these ideas in places like this. That's why we brought it to the campus. This is in early days, we're maybe 10% of the way that we're going as far as this is concerned, but we're trying to operationalize how all these processes can work. So maybe in 10 or 15 years, when some of us are very old and you people are actually doing very well in your careers, you will come back and you'll say, this is one place in which all of these processes, many of the ideas we're talking about, but much more concretely, are actually working and testing. Because for us, this is our living lab. I mean, fortunately, unfortunately for you guys, you'll be coming here once a week, sorry. But most of your time is going to be spent in Sadashiv Nagar in some senses. But you'll be coming here to experience this process and see what can happen from it. And hopefully, you'll be able to join us in making that happen. So I'll close with that. Very simple ideas. I maybe have sounded quite philosophical in some senses. There are many things that need to get done. They have to be brought together. But this is a special place and you are special people. And we hope that in the journey that we'll share over the next, well, today, of course, and over the next couple of years or 3 or 4 years, we can actually push the boundaries of what it is to be human, what it is to actually make that change in ourselves and otherwise. And actually, in some ways, if you're able to do that, you know, the world doesn't matter because you change India, then you change the world. No? So I'll stop there. Thank you.